Who Killed Asha? A murder mystery written by Mr. K. Mallikarjunan. Absence of a clue sometimes is the presence of a positive pointer to the culprit. Only doctor's report can confirm whether it is a suicide or not. Inspector shook his head ominously, standing tall in his crisp khaki with his sharp eyes on Asha's body that dangled from the ceiling fan. She was clad in the very popular salwar set with a chunni tied round her neck to the fan. Her eyes were frozen in a lifeless stare and her facial features contorted in an expression of struggle. The legs and the arms dangled freely from her slim body. A constable began untying the noose to free the body for medical examination. Dr. Raghu, kindly proceed and let me know. The inspector requested the stout, middle-aged, greying doctor with a pair of scholarly eyes peeping from behind metal-framed glasses. The inspector's searching glance then travelled round the room. The bare study table with a small pile of curricular books on it evidenced that Asha was a college student. A couple of drinking glasses stood by the heap, one with remnants of water and the other with traces of orange juice. Pushed under the table stood a wooden chair. The cot stood a few inches away from the center of the fan, indicating the possibility of a suicidal person just stepping off the edge to let the noose tighten. The floor showed no marks of the cot having been moved. A small alarm clock ticked away on the table, showing 7:30 in the morning. The fingerprint expert was busy in his work. The inspector thoughtfully stepped towards a cushiony sofa beside the doorway. On this sofa lay slumped the plump, middle-aged Sudha Rani. Even when those streaks of grey, she retained the feminine charm. The trendy way in which she wrapped in her sari indicated that she was a club bird and an avid socialite. Stooping, the inspector consoled her. "Control yourself, madam. We shall soon find out the culprit if this turns out to be a murder." "Inspector," she pleaded in between sobs, wiping her tears, "I may be her stepmother, but I consider her as my own daughter. I have brought her up from the age of 8, nearly 12 years ago, when I married her widower father. I can't bear this sight." "Madam, don't. Please calm yourself. In the meantime, can I take up my duty of having a few words with all those who were here in the house last night?" Snivelling, she replied, "Ever since my husband passed away 5 years ago, only we 4 stay here. Cook Ramu, servant Lakshmi, Asha, and I." Then she turned towards the door and called, "Lakshmi." "Coming, madam," responded a quivering voice from the ground floor, followed by the sound of hesitant footsteps rushing over the stairs. A nervous, dark-complexioned girl, gulping and trembling, limped into the room. "It is a congenital defect," explained Sudha, pointing to her maid's limp. Nodding, the inspector looked at her right leg that appeared a little short and almost dangling. She seemed to put her whole weight on her left leg. Abruptly, he asked her, "Lakshmi, how long are you with this family?" "About 8 years, sir," was the nervous reply. "Can you tell me how you came to know about the whole thing?" Lakshmi swallowed again. Her whole frame shook in fright and beads of sweat trickled down her face. "Don't worry, Lakshmi. Tell me what you saw," said the inspector encouragingly. She cleared her throat and began. "Sir, every day in the morning I bring up to Asha madam the daily bed coffee at 6:30. She is very particular about the time. Today also I brought it up. Normally, the door is closed, but not locked. As usual, I knocked and there was no response. It has happened many times because she used to sleep sometimes up to 6:45 also. So I pushed open the door to see whether she was sleeping. Here she paused, overcome with nervousness. Go ahead, said the inspector. I was shocked to see the madam hanging. She turned her frightened eyes away from Asha's body. Then I limped down and woke up madam and informed her. Sudha nodded and confirmed. Yes, Inspector, it was at that time I telephoned you. Maybe around 6:35 a.m. Lakshmi, how is your relationship with Asha? She has been good to me. Did you quarrel with her yesterday? At this abrupt attack, a look of scare came over her eyes. She stared and remained silent. The inspector followed up. I'm asking you, please reply. A mild tremble shook her frail and young frame. She was about 22. Yes, sir, she admitted. She wanted me to iron her sari. Because I had to go out for purchasing household goods, I could not do it till I returned in the evening. She called me and, slapping me twice, threatened to chuck me out. Madam had to intervene. Then she calmed down. What time was it? It was about 6 p.m. I remember because Sudha madam was about to leave for the club. Was it the only occasion, or were there earlier occasions? This time it was Sudha who replied. Inspector, almost every day they quarrelled. I had very frequently to intervene. Asha is highly irritable and quick in losing her temper. Yesterday, just before leaving for the club, I had to persuade Lakshmi to carry the juice to Asha because first she refused to carry it. Yes, admitted Lakshmi. I took the juice from the dining table and placed it on the table in her room. The inspector was distracted by the sound caused by the fingerprints expert as he dragged out the chair from under the table. Look, Inspector, he pointed out at the faint footprints on the shiny surface of the chair. Somebody stood on it. The impressions are regular and appear to be those of a female. The inspector continued. Did you go again into her room after that? No, sir. Was she taking the juice every day? Yes, sir. What time daily? At about 9 o'clock after dinner. Asha madam was particular that none disturb her during study time. So regularly I used to take it from the fridge and keep it at about 7 p.m. Was anyone visiting Asha madam? Sudha said, no, Inspector, she had very few friends. She was always immersed in her studies and very rarely came out of her room. Madam, Sudha, do you see any reason for her to end her life? Failure in examinations or any unsuccessful love affair? Sudha replied, none, Inspector. She has been also a good student in her final MBA class. The inspector leaned forward, narrowed his eyes and gave her a searching glare. What is the relationship between Asha and her stepmother? You? For a brief second, a startled expression crept over Sudha's features. Then she burst into a violent fit of sobs. Inspector, we have been together for 12 years, as I told you. No, madam, sorry, it is my duty to ask you. He turned to Lakshmi and asked, can you tell me when Sudha madam returned? Almost daily she returns by midnight. The inspector firmly asked, what time did you open the door yesterday? She replied nervously, no, sir, I did not open. Ramu might have opened it. Every day one of us opens the door. I think Lakshmi can go now. He noted that Lakshmi heaved a sigh of relief as she left. Turning to Sudha, he asked, you visit the club regularly? Yes, Inspector, to play cards. Inspector, the death appears to have occurred at about 10 p.m. last night. Dr. Raghu gestured towards the body. There are traces of undigested food as also of a sedative. Traces of the sedative are in the glass from which the victim drank the fruit juice. He pointed to the glass on the table. The marks around her neck indicate that she was strangled while lying on the bed. Had it been a case of hanging, the same marks would have been nearer the lower part of the chin. It is a case of murder by strangulation. I shall send the official report to your office. For detailed post mortem exam, the body may please be sent to the hospital. So, bye everyone. The doctor picked up his medical kit and bustled out. The inspector fell into a thoughtful attitude. So, a murder? He muttered to himself. He turned to Sudha. Who are the people whom you met yesterday in the club? Mrs. Radha Rao, Mrs. Patnaik, and Mrs. Lamba. Any other close friends, madam? And he looked at her directly in the eyes. She seemed to have understood what he meant. Yes, Mr. Ravi Mohan, the industrialist. She blushed a little. How close is the relationship? Her eyes turned to the floor. In fact, we are going to be married shortly. When did you return from the club, madam? Around midnight after having dinner. Dinner with Mr. Ravi Mohan? Yes, Inspector. Madam, after you returned, did you go to Asha's chamber? No, Inspector. I went straight to my room and started sleeping as I was tired. Okay, madam, shall we talk to your cook, Ramu? Sure, Inspector. Then she called Ramu. An old skeletal man with spiky grey hair asthmatically wheezed in to the room with the folds of the traditionally worn dhoti fluttering in the fan breeze. There was truthfulness in his eyes as he faced the inspector, almost trembling. In reply to inspector's queries, he answered that he was with them for nearly a decade. He lived in that small room in the ground floor, the window of which opened onto the road. How many keys are there of the main entrance door? Two, sir. One with Asha madam and another is left on the wall opposite the entrance. I see. It is taken only when we go out because the door has an automatic latch which locks the door when it closes. The inspector's eyes twinkled with interest. He leaned forward and asked, It can be opened from inside even without a key? Yes, sir. Ramu shivered as the inspector's eyes travelled down to his feet. The toes of both feet appeared crooked and twisted, forming an odd shape. Did you hear any sound yesterday night around, say, about 10 p.m.? Ramu's grey, bushy eyebrows knitted in thought. Ah, yes, I did hear the sound of a car. It was as if the car went out of order and stopped suddenly near the gate. After about 5 minutes, it suddenly roared away. Any sound of the entrance door opening? No, sir. After that, I slept off. When I got up, only in the morning, I heard Lakshmi telling Madam about the incident. Thank you, Ramu. You may go now. With an expression that spoke of immense relief, Ramu wheezed out. The fingerprints expert, who had taken the impression of all the 3 inmates of the house, told the inspector, Vikram, all the door handles, windows, and the key on the hook contain the prints only of the inmates and none of an outsider. And the key lying in the victim's table drawer contains only her prints. But what is puzzling you? Asked the inspector keenly, looking at the fingerprint official. The glass containing the traces of juice bears prints only of the victim and the servant. The inspector's face became thoughtful. After a few seconds, he sighed and said, Okay, thank you. I shall study the report in detail after reaching the office. As the official stepped out of the room, the inspector, glancing behind the official, muttered to himself, Poor man, he doesn't know that what he told me has put me on the right track. Preparing to leave, the inspector stepped over the table for a last look. Casually, he picked up the books and flipped through the pages. His fingers froze in surprise as a postcard sized photograph fluttered down onto the table. He picked it up and looked at it. It was a color portrait of a handsome middle aged man with a neatly trimmed dark mustache over a smile that could attract any female. He was in a white shirt, a maroon tie knotted below the chin. On the back of the photo, a scribbled text read, "With best wishes from Ravi Mohan." He turned his eyes towards Sudharani. She did not notice him. The inspector slipped quietly into his pocket and walked up to her. "Thank you, madam. I shall contact you again if needed. But don't forget to invite me to your marriage." He stalked out, his spiked boots clattering on the stairs on his way down. Reaching the main hall, he looked at the wall opposite the entrance. The other key of the main door innocently dangled from the key hook. "Ramu," he called. Ramu nervously emerged from the kitchen and responded, "Yes, sir." "Do you know who he is?" asked the inspector in a low voice, showing the photograph. Ramu stared at it. "No, sir." "Did he visit Sudha or Asha any time?" "No, sir." "Did either of them speak to anyone called Ravi Mohan on the telephone?" "Yes, sir. I have heard both speak on cell phones, addressing him by name." "What did they normally talk? Do you remember?" I have heard them speak with great emotion also, sir." "In anger?" "No, sir. The other thing," Ramu said with a little embarrassment. "Did you keep this photo in that book?" asked the inspector abruptly. "No, sir. No, I didn't." Ramu almost screamed in terror. "Don't worry, I only joked." The inspector went round Ramu's bedroom. What Ramu said was true, as one could hear from the window any sound on the road. "Okay, Ramu, let me go." The inspector pulled open the door that gave in smoothly without any noise. Then, to the great relief of Ramu, he stalked out, followed by the constable. As he was about to get into the jeep, he noticed the tire marks of a car near the gate. It looked as if a car had pulled up a little ahead of the gate and then, reversing, drove back the way it came. Since there was almost no traffic on the road, the mark appeared fresh and to have been made a few hours ago. Excitedly, he tipped to Sudha's car that was parked and examined the tire threads. The designs were the same as those he found near the gate. He shook his head as it struck to him as nothing unusual in the tire marks of the owner's car appearing at the gate of the owner. He leapt back into the jeep and drove away. On the way to his station, his eyes fell on a furniture shop. Through its glass frontage, he could see a big sofa set, a table, a chair, and a dressing mirror. Suddenly, his right foot crushed the brake, and the jeep swerved to the left. He felt like screaming, "Eureka! I know the identity of the murderer." He resumed his drive with the full satisfaction of having solved the mystery. Inspector Vikram, sitting before the commissioner, explained the process adopted by him in the detection of the culprit. "Sir, I have been able to fix the identity of the murderer in the case." "Good, Vikram. Please let me know how you arrived at it," asked the commissioner, with his starched uniform reaching around in sharp folds. "Sir, initially I suspected all the four, Sudha, Ramu, Lakshmi, and Ravi Mohan." "Suspected all?" "Yes." "Then?" "The chair in the furniture shop reminded me of the significance of the footprints. All the clues, namely the footprints, the fingerprints on the two glasses, the entrance door, its automatic lock and keys, the tire marks at the gate, and the photograph, told me the whole story. Firstly, it was obvious that the culprit, after strangling the victim, stood on the chair and tied the neck with the chunni to the fan to make it look like a suicide. To facilitate strangling, the culprit had ensured that the sedative was mixed in the fruit juice. The inspector paused and sipped a glass of water as the commissioner remained listening. Further, Vikram continued, only Ramu, the cook, and Lakshmi, the servant, remained at home, while Mrs. Sudha had left for the club at about 7 pm. Okay, go ahead. As the shape of the footprints were regular, it could not have been Ramu's because his toes are crooked. It could also not be Lakshmi's either because she cannot stand properly on both legs. Further, the impression was that of a female. Could be Asha's also. Then whose was it? Someone from outside had entered the house to commit the murder. The culprit's entry would not have been noticed also as the door opened and closed noiselessly. You said it had automatic locks? Exactly. It could be opened from inside without the key, but from outside it needed a key. I see. The commissioner gestured him to continue. So someone took the second key and opened the door and entered. The entry was also noiseless as the door opened smoothly. It is obvious that the key was taken away by Sudha before leaving for the club. Also, there was no other overlapping tire marks over these, which are fresh. It is therefore evident that Sudha's car drew up at the gate last night. Also, Ramu's testimony of hearing the sound confirms this fact. But either Sudha or her possible accomplice, Ravi Mohan, could have used the car as also the key to gain stealthily into the house. But Sudha was interested in marrying him and she would not allow Ravi Mohan to enter the house at all, particularly alone, because of the love affair between Asha and Ravi Mohan. As established by the presence of the photo and the subsequent statement of the cook. The absence of Ravi Mohan's fingerprints on the key also confirms that he has not entered. So it was Sudha who entered. This love affair is also a strong motive for Sudha to eliminate Asha. Yes, it's clear. But who mixed the sedative? Lakshmi, as per her own statement, used to take the glass every day from the fridge. But on that day, she took it from the dining table. And that too after specific instructions from Sudha. Why? Here the negative clue or the absence of the fingerprints of Sudha tells us a tale. If the clue is read properly, it was Sudha who prepared the juice, mixed the sedative and placed it on the table, taking care to wipe off the prints. She then asked the servant to take it to the room. Yes, Vikram, that seems to clinch the issue. So please do proceed against Sudha and also accept my congratulations for solving the case within a day. The end.